state ready to close?
Your Honor, before we begin our closing argument, may I reserve any remaining time up to 5 minutes for my rebuttal argument?
You may.
May I approach the bench and retrieve the autopsy report at stage 1?
You may.
And may I have permission to set up the well with an easel I'll be using?
You may.
Thank you.
And who's closing for the defense?
I am, Your Honor.
If you need to move around to see anything you need demonstratives he's using, feel free.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I proceed?
You may.
This is why we're here today. On its face, it's just 2 pieces of paper, labeled State's Exhibit 1. But look closer and you'll see that this autopsy report tells a story. It describes how Jacob Bennett was killed. A single gunshot wound to the chest. It describes how he was found, buried in a shallow grave while it's still in his pocket. The only thing taken from it is life. And it describes how he was identified by his wife's confirmation that the man laid before her was the man she had spent the last 20 years of her life standing beside. It was easy to forget all that today, to lose sight of the fact that Jacob Bennett was a man with a wife and a family. And the reason it was easy to forget is because when it came down to it, Casey Maxwell and the defendant didn't stop to think about it. When their partnership with Mr. Bennett went bad, they stopped seeing him as a man. They started seeing him as an obstacle. Jacob Bennett was the partner who stood in the way. And it was Casey Maxwell and the defendant who formed a new partnership and took him out. Members of the jury, both the members of that partnership have been indicted for Mr. Bennett's murder. They've been charged with acting in complicity to kill Mr. Bennett. Complicity, that's a legal term, but as the judge will tell you in just a minute, all it really means is that they acted together to kill Mr. Bennett, and that they both wanted him dead. And now that's important because everyone in this courtroom seems to agree that Casey Maxwell was involved. You heard it from Mr. Bryant himself in opening statement. He stood here and he told you Jacob Bennett was killed on Casey Maxwell's boat with Casey Maxwell's gun. 2 of the defense witnesses testified to the relationship, the poor relationship, between Casey Maxwell and the victim. But no matter what the defense or their witnesses tries to tell you, this is not a case where it's either Casey Maxwell or Jackie Owens. The real question here today was whether it was both of them. And the evidence we've shown you definitively proves Miss Owens was a full partner in this crime. Let's be very clear about what we had to prove, members of the jury. We had to prove that Jackie Owens aided in the commission of this crime, not that Jackie Owens pulled the trigger, as Mr. Bryant told you on his opening statement. And we proved it. We have met our burden that Jackie Owens helped commit this crime. Let's walk through how he did it using the 3 things my co-counsel, Ms. Yee, asked you to keep in mind at the beginning of today's trial. First, we showed you that Miss Owens had a reason to want Jacob Bennett dead. The defendant herself admitted to Miss Shannon Stark that if she did not get $5 million immediately, she was as good as dead. But then the answer, the buyout offer you've heard so much about, came sliding across Miss Owens' desk, only for Jacob Bennett to slide it right back. At that point, the defendant's only hope was to take out the man standing in her way. Let's put 2 witnesses on the stand to tell you that Jackie Owens would not have done it. Both Adrian Malone and Alex Grace testified. Jackie Owens and Jacob Bennett were the best of friends, and members of the jury, the state does not dispute that. That's what makes this case so tragic. Miss Owens was willing to throw away the life of a friend and partner just to pull herself out of a hole she gambled her way into. The evidence shows that's exactly what happened. Jacob Bennett went missing just a week after he said no to the buyout offer Miss Owens needed. taken. That is not coincidence, folks. That's murder. And that brings us to our second point, that the defendant secretly partnered with Casey Maxwell to commit that murder. Detective Art Fitch sat on this stand here today. He told you about a wiretap phone call. Doing what Casey Maxwell calls the defendant, and the very first thing out of the defendant's mouth. Not over the phone, you idiot. You think people can't listen to this. People can't listen to this. Members of the jury, there's only one category of people who listen in on phone calls. It's the government, and we can be pretty confident Ms. Owens wasn't worried about the police listening in on her and Casey Maxwell discussing their innocence. It's clear from that phone call they were trying to hide something. And our third point, the physical evidence shows us exactly what they were trying to hide. Opposing counsel asked you, where was Casey Maxwell? Where was Casey Maxwell? He asked you that on opening statement. Members of the jury, Casey Maxwell was on the boat with Jackie Owens because they both killed Mr. Bennett together on the night of June 16th. Now, the defense put a witness on the stand to tell you that wasn't true. Alex Grace sat there and told you Jackie Owens was eating dinner with me all night on the 16th. Members of the jury, you heard on cross-examination. Mr. Grace's story conveniently makes him the only one who can corroborate his best friend's alibi. Heard from Mr. Grace on cross-examination, he owes the defendant his entire career. That's why we turned to a witness that could not lie about Jackie Owens' whereabouts on the night of June 16th. We turned to our silent witness, as Dr. Lee told you about. That's the physical evidence, members of the jury. Now that silent witness revealed a chain of evidence linking Jackie Owens to each and every stage of this crime. Now that's true. A broken chain of evidence shows that Casey Maxwell cannot be linked to the latter stages of the crime. To be sure, somebody moved and buried the body, but it wasn't Casey Maxwell. No blood in her tires, no bleach in her trunk. She could not have done this alone. The evidence tells us who her partner was. This is definitive evidence that Jackie Owens was involved in the commission of this crime, and under Midland's law, that means she's guilty no matter what role Miss Maxwell played. Now, those three things, those are how we proved our case. But even if somehow the motive, the concealed interactions, and the physical evidence weren't enough, well, the defendant herself told you all you need to hear. When Detective Finch laid it all out for her, when he said, I know you and Maxwell killed Bennett for money, what did the defendant say? You'll never prove it. Not you're crazy, not I would never hurt my friend. You'll never prove it. Because in the defendant's mind, it was never a question of whether she'd done it. It was just a question of whether she'd get caught. And that's what's so sad, but so fitting about this case. She put a price on a life. She killed a man. And when the police called her out on it, no remorse, not even an ounce of regret. Just more of the same selfish arrogance that made her think she could get away with it in the first place. Show her she was wrong, members of the jury. Show her she cannot sidestep the law and she could not hide the evidence. Deliver justice for Jacob Bennett. Find the defendant guilty of murder. Thank you.